The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in strong opposition to H.R. 4371. Kayla Hamilton's death was a senseless tragedy, and my heart goes out to her family and her loved ones. Every single one of us wants to do anything we can to make sure such a thing doesn't happen again. And I understand the impulse to do just anything to try and prevent this. But responsible governance means working together to create sensible solutions, not weaponizing tragedies to push through political priorities. Under the guise of, quote, preventing child trafficking, this bill would subject unaccompanied kids to abusive practices like invasive bodily searches. It would make it harder to release them from detention, in spite of the protections that Congress established in the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act of 2008. That was a bill that was passed by both chambers by unanimous consent. I do wish that we were working on real reforms that are needed, especially as President Trump has set aside long-standing protections for unaccompanied children. Right now, these kids are spending more time in government custody than ever amidst Trump's campaign of mass kidnappings and disappearances. An NIH study found that 75 to 80% of unaccompanied children are victims of human trafficking. But instead of treating them like victims of crime, this bill treats them like the criminals. The majority claims that there are no security procedures in place for unaccompanied children, but that is simply not true. Since 2019, CBP has taken the fingerprints of unaccompanied children that are 14 and over. This policy that was started by the Trump administration continued by the Biden administration. This means that at least 70% of the unaccompanied children who entered during the previous administration were subjected to fingerprinting and background checks. Additionally, according to the Office of Refugee Resettlement, they have, quote, procedures in place to obtain background information on the unaccompanied alien child from the referring federal agency to assess whether the child is a danger to self or others, end quote. And they use this background information to determine where to place unaccompanied children. Furthermore, under the Flores Settlement Agreement, which the Republicans have been trying over and over again to overturn, children are allowed to be held in detention if they are convicted or charged with a criminal offense other than petty offenses, were adjudicated as a delinquent or are in delinquency proceedings, engaged in violent or disruptive conduct or threats, escaped from another facility, or otherwise are a flight risk, or other compelling circumstances. It is disingenuous to pretend that unaccompanied children are all unvetted criminals, as this bill seems to do. Rather than fix some of the very real problems in the immigration system, this bill doubles down on cruelty, subjecting children to strip searches to look for, quote, gang tattoos. It would force them into prison-like, quote, secure facilities if they are deemed to have a gang tattoo or be involved in a gang. Unfortunately, we have seen what this administration considers to be, quote, gang tattoos. They sent Jersey Reyes Barrios, a professional soccer player who was tortured by the Maduro regime, to the notorious Salvadorian gulag, Secat, saying his tattoo of the Real Madrid soccer logo meant that he was Tren de Aragua. The administration claimed Neri Jose Alvarado Borges, a baker and asylum seeker, was a member of Tren de Aragua due to his tattoo honoring someone with autism. And they disappeared him to Secat, too, of course, without any due process. It's also important to note that under current policy, adult immigrants detained by our government cannot be strip searched without reasonable suspicion. This bill doesn't have any similar guardrails. It actually would treat kids in custody worse than adults. The bill also denies kids the ability to be placed with their parents if they're not U.S. citizens or green card holders. Preventing kids from being placed with their relatives will deny them the ability to go to loving homes and force them to languish in government custody for months. This will not help prevent child trafficking. It will help promote family separation. The bill also forces HHS to tell DHS the immigration status of anyone that lives in the home of a kid's sponsor, aiding President Trump's efforts to prioritize deporting moms and dads over murderers and deadly criminals. Since President Trump's inauguration, countless stories have emerged about ICE agents arresting parents and conducting intimidating, quote, wellness checks as a pretext for taking unaccompanied children and their guardians into custody. This bill is clearly aimed at supporting that project so that ICE can meet Stephen Miller's cruel 3,000 immigration arrest target per day. The Trump administration already treats unaccompanied children horribly, and this bill would only make things worse. I have personally gone and observed the docket at immigration court for kids. It's called the kids docket. What I saw would horrify most Americans. Kids as young as 5, one clinging to a stuffed animal, trying to represent themselves in a complicated legal proceeding in a language that they struggle to understand. Can you imagine a 5-year-old child who doesn't speak English trying to represent themselves in court, being instructed by a judge that you as a child have the right to call a witness and cross-examine the government's witnesses? Going up against a seasoned ICE trial attorney, a full-grown adult who has gone to law school, and trying to challenge what they say about you as a child? It sounds like an absurd nightmare, but this is reality for too many children. Our system already does a great disservice to these kids, and this bill would just make it worse. It's also laughable to claim that the Republican Party is focused on eradicating child trafficking. Under President Trump and Secretary Noem, the agents in Homeland Security investigations who are normally tasked with going after child traffickers have been detailed to enforcement and removal operations. Instead of working on targeted takedowns of dangerous criminals, they're patrolling the streets to go after random people they think might be undocumented because they look Latino or they speak Spanish. Thanks to the Republican Party, Homeland Security investigators worked approximately 33% fewer hours on child exploitation cases this year compared to last year. And if we really want to protect kids, we need to address their number one cause of death. Not immigrants, but guns. This week, following the anniversary of the horrific shooting at Sandy Hook, we are mourning the deaths of innocents at 2 mass shooting events. Here in America, at Brown University, 2 people were murdered, and an entire campus was traumatized, including several students who had previously been in other school shootings. Despite the president and the FBI claiming otherwise, that shooter is still at large. And yet I don't see any effort in this body to take up the issue of sensible gun reforms. These mass shootings at schools across the country cannot be normalized. Let's finally address gun violence and get guns out of the hands of people who should not have them. We also witnessed a horrific anti-Semitic mass shooting at Australia's Bondi Beach that left 15 people dead, including a Holocaust survivor who died saving his wife. The only reason the death toll wasn't higher is because Australia banned semi-automatic weapons, and shooters could only fire 1 bullet at a time. Gun violence like this is very rare in Australia because it does have some of the strongest gun violence prevention laws in the world. And yet still, the government there is talking about taking further action to regulate guns and to take on anti-Semitism. That's what we should be doing if we care about protecting our kids. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from Washington reserves.